Please
on.
turn your
Mic's on.
microphones on.
Mike's on.
What's that? All right, have a pledge of allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, yeah?
Barbara,
Present.
Randy? Mike Jones?
Yep.
Chris? Yay! Kim?
Here.
Gretchen?
Here.
Justine, you said will be here soon. Sarah Stevenson?
Here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hope Gaines contacted me. She's not going to be here. Mr. Yeager?
Here.
Charlotte? Yes. Good morning. And Mrs. Judge is not going to be here.
Okay.
Okay, so can I?
Go ahead, you want to say something?
A lot of you know that over the past several meetings at least, I keep asking people to repeat things. Well, I finally went for a hearing test and I found out it wasn't all you, it was partially me. So I am in the process of getting hearing aids. And I don't know where we stand. I don't know if you would like to have a secretary younger than 83 who has a hearing issue or not. So all of you have to decide what to do. This is, as far as I am concerned, my being secretary of the Environmental Commission is not a lifetime goal. It is in support of Charlotte Todd and all of the work that she has done over the last 50 years. And if you decide you want to cut your losses, that's fine too. So, Mike, you'll take us, we'll figure it out. But in the meantime, please try to talk loud enough so I can take minutes. I found out I can listen to it on the streaming service and closed caption it, but I really don't want to spend my life doing this. You know, this is a,
Well, the
Got it.
question I have is, do you yes, or do you not want to do it? I mean,
well, I'm willing to try it with hearing aids, and if people are going to speak up and,
This was really good.
that's not a problem with me.
Merrill, we promise to talk louder.
okay. Because, I mean, I've been secretary of the Environmental Commission for more than half of the 50-some-odd years I've been here. I did the 90s, 80s, 90s, and with Charlotte, and she raises our hand, and I am very proud of the work I've done with her.
Another thing to say.
So
It's a good thing.
it's up to you, but that's it, and Mike made a plea for people to please speak up.
Yeah, let's
You're
please-
looking at me when you say that.
No, I'm looking past you because it's, the only ones I absolutely always hear are both mics.
Everybody who, if you didn't hear me before, I got a call from someone who likes to watch the meetings, and she can't hear them because none of us talk into our mics. So we ought to try and talk a little bit more into our mics so everybody can hear us, that's all. And I think we ought to keep the status quo as long as you still want to do it.
Okay.
Okay? We have the minutes for January 23rd for approval. Anybody have any comments? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Randy?
I second the motion.
And
All in
Barbara.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okey-dokey. And we have a new member, Sarah. How you doing?
Good.
You
Nice
want
to
to
meet everybody.
You want to say something about yourself? What are we doing here?
Sure, sure. I grew up in the area. I moved away for about 10 years after college to work in tech. So I did work on one solar panel project, kind of related tangentially. Now I moved back last June. I work in real estate, so I'm dealing a lot with land use and impervious land use, all of that fun stuff. And yeah, I'm excited to be on the committee. The last time I was in this room was for the Master Plan Advisory Committee in, I think it was 2018. So it's been a while, but happy to be here and happy to meet everyone.
Nice.
Glad to have
Welcome.
Thanks.
you. Okey-dokey. Okay. Planning Board report. Last meeting, we did approve a project over in Lemaire, and we had a report written by this lovely lady over here. And her comments were pretty much that the landscape plan was inadequate because for the obvious reasons, a lot of it it had non-invasive species. And the wording was, we strongly recommend that applicants select from the attached list of eco-friendly native low-water plant species for use. And this has been approved by the city, and the project was approved, and all these comments were read directly into the resolution for approval. And the applicant was obviously in favor of doing whatever we wanted them to do here. Again, now it's just we have to make sure that and follow up that what they did, what they're going to do is what they recommended here. And it's just our make sure that we can go by there and see what they're doing. And if there's any comments, we can make an effort to get back to the construction department and see that they do what they're supposed to do there. We don't have a meeting tonight, so there won't be any report for me today. Mike, you have a council report on anything? Anything going on?
Well, we are going to talk today about the dark sky ordinance. At the last council, or 2 council meetings ago, I had brought up the subject. I said, remember that, we had promised to come back with something a bit more detailed than we had in the past. And it was a question of whether or not council should have a discussion first before sending a proposed ordinance, which Kim had provided a draft of an ordinance, by the way, which was from Hopewell, New Jersey. And all of council saw it, and we decided that, well, we could have a brief discussion about it, and then definitely we're going to forward it to the planning and zoning boards. However, there's, at this point in time, and I didn't really get to talk to Kim about it, we've had one phone conversation where we talked about, and having talked with the city attorney, pretty much he didn't know where to go with this. So what he was asking for was for Kim and I to put together an educational, let's identify what our real objectives are. What are the key issues, et cetera, and where we go from there. And I'm going to let the city manager, I'm not sure, I think maybe right now is the right time to talk about this. So there's an opinion amongst city management that we ought to take a slightly different approach to what we were taking, which was to simultaneously draft an ordinance and put together educational materials. I mean, if nobody's read this ordinance before, maybe you have. It's fairly complicated. It's kind of difficult for most people to grasp, and as you can imagine, it's a very difficult to enforce type of ordinance. And I'll let Paul talk about this in a little bit more detail, but I think all I'm saying is that I think we're going to take a little longer to get where we want to get, but the education part we can get started on right away. So.
Morning, everybody.
More, Paul.
So I've been working on dark sky lighting for about 2.5 years.
Excuse me,
What is that?
what is the ordinance?
We're talking about dark sky lighting.
Door side?
Dark.
Dark sky.
Dark sky.
Dark sky.
So I was trying to keep instead of the lights being shining up in the air, let's keep the lights downward facing.
I got you.
And,
Yeah,
and,
okay, I
and
understand.
there. So prior to coming here to Cape May City, as engineer for the Upper Township and both the Planning and Zoning Board and the municipal engineer, that became a very big focus of our shore community and some of our inland people. And about 2.5, 3 years ago, like I said. So I've been wrangling with this topic, so I kind of come to this having studied it for quite a bit. And I think to have it, to be effective, I think we need to start with an education program to bring a lot of more ground support for it, because otherwise it's going to die. And I say this from experience, because I spent about 2 years working with our green team, working with a subcommittee of the planning board and residents, and trying to come up with ordinances. And I actually had an ordinance introduced on township committee, ready for adoption, and then the public comment came, and it just got shut up, and then, committee decided, oh, maybe we need to think about this more. Then it went back to the committee, and we wrangled, and there it died on the vine. And I don't want that to happen.
This was an upper.
This was in Upper Township. This was in Upper Township. So I'm just going to give you a background of where I'm coming from. So I don't want this effort just to get an ordinance. And you kind of, the city we tackled this last year, but we started it from the nuisance side, and, we had comments from the Environmental Commission, we had comments from HPC, and the HPC already kind of has guidelines in their new HPC standards that talk about shielded light, lumens, and stuff like that. So for a vast majority of the city, I think we already have a standard and have some protection for new development. But the problem is when and I've looked at probably a dozen ordinances in trying to come up with a standard or something to recommend in Upper Township. I think in Cape May City, I think it's actually going to be a little bit easier, because we essentially just have two regimes. We have our commercial section, we have a residential section. In Upper Township, I had so many more areas and environs to think about, because besides the urban area that like Cape May City and a commercial zone, we had half-acre lots, we had 1 acre lots, 3 acre lots, 25 and 10 acre lots. So you can imagine each of those different areas had different requests. So here in Cape May City, I think it's going to be much more easier to develop an ordinance. But I think we still have the same problems, that we develop an ordinance and all of the existing homes that are there, and people are misguided. They think that, oh, we have this dark sky ordinance, and then they start looking around their neighbors. Oh, that one's not right, that one's not right, and that one's not right. But the ordinance is for new, not for old. And what I really think is important is, as Mike was trying to say, I think an education, to start with educating the public on why dark sky is important. And actually, I'll just give you another. I lived for 20 years in Dennis Township. Dennis Township, is very rural in nature, and by just statute, the township committee doesn't approve any streetlights. So when you drive through Dennis Township, there's only 2 little pockets within Dennis Township that actually have streetlights. So, from Dennis Township, especially when you got to Belle Plaine and Belle Plaine State Park, it's one of the darkest spots in the state, actually, and it was great. In the state. Belle Plaine, that's where a lot of astronomers go to kind of really look at, be able to get a good view of the sky, and they have astronomy parties and stuff like that. So I'm digressing a little bit, but I talk about some of that history so that we don't go down and make some of those same mistakes, and we have a better plan. I think the nuisance ordinance that was adopted by the city is a good way to essentially do that, handle nuisance problems where you've got a little spotlight in your backyard, it's shining in your neighbor's yard, and able to solve that problem of nuisance light. But to solve the broader issue of, because it's coming from, most of the light does come from commercial properties. Street lights are an issue, especially working with Lansing Electric and making sure when they replace with the LED technology, they're still a little bit behind, and they're just standardized putting in white light LEDs. Though most of their fixtures are downward facing, it's still a white light, which is different than the standard yellow light that you have in the high pressure sodium lights that you have today. So I really, if you adopt any of these dark sky ordinances that are out there, and there's about 3 or 4 decent ones throughout the state. Nationally, there's a bunch, but they're wrought with problems of enforcement and having a false sense of, this commission is going to go through and spend all this time and then try to get it through the planning board, and even if it gets through the planning board and goes through city council, we're going to have a false sense of it's only for new lighting, and it's not going to solve the existing lighting on existing, just think about all of the hotels that are along the beachfront. They're not going to change unless we have an educational program and do an encouragement from a grassroots standpoint. And that's where I think, where we should lead our focus in the beginning, and then come up with an ordinance based on, after some educational effort.
In Upper Township, did you implement any educational programs?
No.
Or no, okay.
No, that's what I'm saying. We went trying to get, everybody on the committees were, hey, let's get the ordinance, let's go. And then, part of the issue was enforcement. That's part of the issue why it died was, and in Upper Township, they're a little bit worse to the extent where they don't have a local police force that can even be out at night, or, or a full-time code enforcement, to the extent like what Cape May City has. So, and that's the hardest thing is enforcement, and going back and, is it an old light? Is it a new light? And when did it get installed? And, now I have to have code enforcement working at night to try to enforce, because obviously the only time you see the lights are at night. So it becomes, enforcement is the most difficult issue to address with these ordinances.
It's no different than the years of trying to preach using native plants in the landscape in the town. We've been doing this work for years. We've had native plant sales for probably close to 15 years, and still people are not doing it in town. And I mean, I don't know the answer. Like, how do we properly do a successful education program for the public? Because we live in a seasonal community where people want to show up and have a landscape or have lighting to enjoy, their yard at all times of the day. So it's a challenge. I wish I knew the answer. I hear what you're saying. We have had at the Nature Center 2 presentations on dark sky, maybe 15 people attended. So usually when we're doing these education programs, we're preaching to the choir. We're preaching to people that already get it. It's how do you get to the people that don't know about it. And I'm just like throwing this out there for everybody. How do we educate people on these practices that we want them to willingly be part of?
Well, we could add it to the newspaper campaign that we did last summer, and, the water conservation, and maybe do one for the dark sky.
And I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer here, but how many people are really, are they seeing that? I mean, we can't give up, we have to make the effort, but is that changing practices? And
Is the driving force behind this bird migration confused birds?
well, that's a big part of the story, and that's such an important story for Cape May,
Yes, it
that we need to educate people, the economic driver of birding and nature viewing to our community. What does that mean? I mean, that should translate directly to hotels and motels. We're filling rooms during the shoulder season because of birding.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's what you know, instead of the broad focus, you try to limit that focus, you know, because even if it's turning the lights off at 11 o'clock, you know, that little step can help go a long way.
I think that, I mean, I really think the right strategy is to target, there's components of the benefits of dark sky, and it starts out with wildlife. And actually, it starts out with energy consumption.
Energy conservation.
And you have wildlife, and you have environment, and you have our own personal health is actually affected by all this. And so if we, Kim sent me the several brochures that they use in Malibu. Malibu already has an ordinance in place. They're very serious about this. They put together some great brochures, but if we send these 4 brochures out to anybody, they're not going to read it all at one time. So I think we can decide here as a group what are the right steps, and let's do it a step at a time. And the only thing, Gretchen, is different about this from the plants is that it's a whole lot easier to change a light bulb than it is to plant a plant, I think. And there's seriously, light bulbs need to be changed in this town. That doesn't mean that that people are going to pay attention to it anymore, but I'm saying that a lot of the stuff that we're suggesting in these brochures is, I think, fairly easy to do. And shielding lights and changing angles of lights. And again, we would just be asking people to do it, don't go out and change all your light fixtures now, but hey, when it's time to replace stuff, why don't you use these standards to replace it? And so it'll take time, and I think that ultimately, if we don't see a whole lot of, I think we'll see improvement, but an ordinance has to follow at some point in time. I think we just need to start with the education part.
And I'll give everybody a little challenge to do at home, because this is kind of what I did when I started, really looking at the ordinances. I went and through the township, I bought a light meter, and I said, all right, let's start, because then I started really, every time I was driving at night, I was looking at every house on my way home between my house and work. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's light. And that's something different. Oh, and that's something different. Because everybody's got something different. And I'll just give, so I live in Ocean City. On my one side, where my kitchen is about 10 feet to the property line. And my neighbor's house is about 5 feet from the property line. And literally, when I turn on the light that's above my sink, that's a high hat, I turn that on, the whole side of my neighbor's house lights up to the point where I'd be in violation of any lighting standard that I came out with. Really? Yes. Then I started looking at my porch lights, and it's like, okay, and then I'm just talking about, so everybody go home, go out and just start turning lights on and off, even inside the house. Potentially on such small lots that we have, if you're close, if you're in that 5 to 10 foot side yard property line distance, your lights would be in violation of almost any ordinance that we would put out there. So that's where and that's where the problem becomes is every one of your homes, if I went there, would be in violation. Now the problem is proving the violation. So here's the other problem. In order to really prove the violation, I have to have everybody else turn off all their lights to show that it's just your light. And I have to turn off all the street lights because, at my house, I've got a street light in the alley and I've got a street light in my house and on the front. Well, that casts, I almost, and as typical standard is 0.5 foot candles. And when I was doing some field lighting, I had a really good installer came out and really educate me on lighting. So when you go outside on a clear night on a full moon, and you can go out and you can kind of see your shadow, if you've ever done that in a big open area, that's about a half a foot candle of light.
Full moon?
Full moon, bright sky, no that's about a half a foot candle. So think about and go around your house and think about that light, that amount of light. And now you start throwing on your porch light. And then the other problem is, okay, it's not necessarily even the first floor porch light. All right, now I've got a second floor deck that comes out there, and then the lights that are up on that, whether they're in a high hat, because you think, oh, well, a high hat up on a second floor porch, that's how more downward facing can you be? But the problem is you elevate that. Now, and this is where people get confused about dark sky lighting and a lighting standard, and you have to apply a standard to the dark sky lighting. That light was probably dark sky lighting, but it probably doesn't meet a half a foot candle at the property line, the standard that we would most likely put in an ordinance.
Well,
So that's,
in my neighborhood, the very complicated process because I live in a veritable development desert. Everybody's got proximity lights. So when the coyote comes walking through everybody's backyard, boop, boop, you can tell the coyote's making his trails around my neighborhood.
but see, that's the better lighting than most because, the security lighting, it goes off. So that's not as much of a problem. So those standards are harder, but when you develop a standard, it's got to have a measurable thing, and most likely, like most commercial standards are, got to be a half a foot candle at the property line. Well, on a 5,000, even a 10,000 square foot lot, it's virtually impossible to meet that standard. And that's why I think having the conversation about dark sky lighting, doing education, encouraging people to just turn your light on. Like, if you got the porch light, either put it on a motion sensor or just make sure when you go to bed, turn off your lights. And I think that's the encouraged activity that you want to do, because otherwise it's just going to be so hard to enforce. And then the problem is everybody here thinks, oh man, we did a great ordinance. The planning board, we did a great ordinance, and council, we did, pass this ordinance. And then who gets the calls? You call the councilman calls me. I go argue with code enforcement, and then it's like, okay, well, nobody can comply. How do I do it? And now we've got this ordinance but everybody felt good because we did it, but we really didn't do anything except give a lot of people a false sense of what we can do and what we can't do. That's why I think education to start, which I agree with Gretchen, is you're preaching to the choir, and it is hard, but it's. That's
we have talked about doing more outreach, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't develop a flyer like we did with water conservation and invasive species. We did ads last year in the Storm Wave. Do we have funding that we're going to continue doing that this year? And
I think so.
so let's make a third flyer. And then, I would volunteer to do this, that take those three concepts that, the whole point is not just to educate, but to have some kind of action. And that action item is what can people do in their own yards. I could put together a PowerPoint presentation with those three focus points and then reach out. I could see that I could talk to the chamber, I could talk to the Kiwanis Club, any other groups. We've talked about like the Cottagers Association or maybe at the Yacht Club,
Or also maybe take it into the schools and ask the schools to partner, because it's always great when the kids come home and shame you as a parent. I have 4 kids, so I'm speaking, when they bring that little flyer home, so maybe that's another.
Yeah.
It's a little tougher here in KMA because we have, a lot of other additional, but I think that's another outreach that, you can get some of the people, at least the locals.
I think
behind.
that, we do, there's a program called Eco Schools that does focus on things like this, and we do, New Jersey Audubon does have an Eco School program. We've worked with Cape May City Elementary on that. I'm just brainstorming here. Like, how do we reach the most people that they're going to, no pun intended, but a light bulb's going to go off and say, aha.
Sitting on the planning board, I'm just amazed that every time we get an application, it's like the architects and the planners and the landscape architects, it's like what we're saying here is like foreign to them. No, we ought to just zero in on, we ought to get a mailing list of, I'm talking about pretty much new type development now. Get it to the architects, some kind of a mailing list to who they are, and say, this is really what, if you come in front of the Cape May Planning Board, you're going to get this. So design your project accordingly.
Yeah.
Same thing with the landscape architects about the invasive species. I'm just amazed that they still don't do that. And construction department, anybody, we ought to have some kind of a mailer or a flyer that anybody who wants to do something new in the city has to get this thing, has to actually physically get this, and say, you're going to see this again if you don't do it now.
Is there so when you go in to apply for a construction permit for a new project, obviously get a packet of the permit applications. Is there a packet that the
Yes.
Environmental Commission could
We can
also
do that.
give?
We can do that, absolutely.
The only problem is, who's it going to? Because if it's the contractor that's pulling the permit, the homeowner never sees it. You know what I mean? So there's that disconnect at the construction office of that.
Well, we ought to just make sure that there is no disconnect. Say the
Yes.
builder gets it and the homeowner gets it.
And it's just reaching out and figuring out how do we do that, whether maybe when the tax assessor sends their added assessment, though they're not necessarily, that would be one way to be able to find out who did it in a project recently to do it. I mean, there's different ways that we can do it.
Whatever mailer we get, we ought to
Yes.
develop that mailer, I guess, soon or something along those lines for this. And then
Right.
start to tailor make it. We know where we want to target it.
Yes.
And then get a mailing list of people, certain people that we know that do a lot of work in the city, and get it to them. I know we've talked about this so often before, and sooner or later, it's going to have to start to hit home, you know. I would
And
think.
it can be one more thing, Gretchen, that you comment on, or Justine, whoever's doing the planning board or the zoning board review, you know, just a comment, you always talk about
Landscaping, we can add lighting, yes.
add lighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but I hear what Mike's saying. It's like, they've already planned their project. Let's get it to them before they actually
Yeah.
design the whole thing. And so they're thinking about these
They all
things.
agree at the very end when we submit this report to them that they all, and Craig reads it into every resolution. This is the way it's going to be. Now, do you agree with what the Environmental Commission wants you to do here? And every one of them says, absolutely, they do it.
Yeah.
Now we just have to make sure we watch and see that they do it. That's all. But then the new stuff I think it's probably easier to hit, but the older stuff, that's a little bit harder.
Right.
You know, the people that are your neighbors, you know, that's a little bit different.
I've done a bit of this and trying to convince the powers to be. You know, you get a surprising amount of pushback from would be the police department and security, because they want more lights. They want more lights, especially, you know, that's their point. It's like, that's my issue is security of the area.
Well, baby steps first. We ought to just, let's get the education part of it started, and then we'll have to work our way through that.
And that really is the thing. We're not saying no lighting, we're saying the type of lighting.
Right.
And, you know, the presentation we had from this guy from the Dark Sky Initiative or whatever, you know, that, if you watch his presentation, you understand. It's like, we're not uplighting into the sky, we're downlighting specific to, so it's still, you know, it's still a lit area.
One of these brochures that Malibu has says, you know, a lot of lighting or bright lighting is not necessarily good lighting. In fact, it can be more dangerous from
Yeah.
a crime standpoint. Again, it's the right lighting, and
Okay.
you know, yeah.
I have to
So
educate myself.
It's a whole other education process that's kind of, hopefully, it can fix the you know, this logic that says bright lights everywhere. It can help.
And And don't forget, the HPC standards does have, I think if you design according to the HPC standards, you're going to comply with dark sky because they already kind of built it into their standards.
Okay,
So-
don't move. Green Team, did they have that meeting?
Yes.
Anybody you want to comment on that? Anybody who was there?
It's,
Gretchen, go first if you want.
it's, yeah, I'm on the green team, and the meeting was specifically about recertification of sustainable Jersey for the city. I think it's every 5 years that you have, every 3 years that you have to recertify. So Jim Rotella is working on that and just gathering all the information. So I don't know if there's a whole lot more to report at this time, but we're putting together all of the parts. You get different points for different measures that the city's done. I think some of the new things in the past couple of years have been the electric vehicles and charging stations.
The
that-
promenade,
the lighting.
surface.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, that's a good point. The heat, yeah.
Looks like it needs to be replaced or added to again.
Well,
Looks like
we
it's
did
fading.
do another section, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's just, I mean, the thing with Sustainable Jersey is you want that certification, and I think the city's at silver level, and which has really helped the city in grant applications and all of that. So we want to toot our own horn as much as possible for all of the achievements that we've done, and so that it's just that was the gist of the meeting, is kind of doing an inventory of what has happened and then putting the documentation together. So we just have to get that information to Jim.
Mike, any more comments? Do you want to comment any further on that?
No, other than this is an important part of the.
Yeah, it says upgrade, retrofit, light pollution.
Charlotte,
Points
you want
for
to
that.
say anything?
10 points, yes.
Points for that. So that's part of the Sustainable Jersey too.
Very briefly. Well, Mr. Rotula has been a strong advocate for the city, gaining some grants over the years for us. And it was a wonderful, I felt, opportunity by various heads of committees and boards to participate together and to listen to each other and be reminded of the kind of work that they've done that would then be culled by Mr. Rotula and help us to achieve various grants now and in the future. So each of us, I think, our assignment is to gather as much of that background information as we have in reserve and share it with him so he can see that the documentation is real and that we have put forth energy to try to broaden our horizons in each of the areas that he's looking at for grants for the city. So that's what, and we do have a meeting again in April 16th, and that's as much as I can share now.
Okay.
If I might add,
Go ahead, Paul.
Jim did present a consultant, and they came in with, there's a new program we're going to be rolling out with Sustainable Jersey, and that's a community solar project, and it's where any resident can sign up to get community solar, and you actually, it'll be a discounted rate from your current electric rate, and so where people, especially if you're living in a historic district where you probably wouldn't be available to put solar on your roof, this would be a a way for you to be able to engage with a solar company. And what they do is, there's these larger companies, and they're usually putting them on warehouses or mini storage facilities throughout the state. And then what they do is they aggregate their energy production and then offer it as a resale to communities that can't do solar, and at that discounted rate. So part of, everybody's electric bill has that little solar, I forget what they call it, but it's a contribution on everybody's electric bill that you pay into to help sustainability, and then they get the energy tax, that company that installs it gets the energy tax credits as part of building it, and then they offer it at a cheaper rate. And if you're a low or lower, very low income resident, you actually get an extra percentage discount as part of it. So that will be rolling out over the next month also.
Okay. All right, we have, Kim had sent us the approved list of dune vegetation from Avalon. Paul, any comment on this about our beach by Lomex?
I did, and I meant to do it earlier, but I just sent out our actual plan, the dune vegetation plan,
Okay.
which has the list. I think it's probably the same list that Lomex has used in other communities, but they have like a salt spray tolerant vegetation, sheltered upland dune vegetation, and then sheltered wetland vegetation. So they kind of give all those.
It's more than Avalon had to.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Okay. Any comment on the English ivy, on the trees throughout the city, Paul? Anything further?
Just something that we're going to try to get working on, but it's not going to be. It's something we'll put on our to-do list for sure.
Could Gretchen comment on the most important plants to be saved along the beach when this goes forward, and which ones we typically feed the birds and butterflies?
Gretchen?
I would just like to be able to see the dune management plan to actually read.
I
yeah.
send it out, so they'll get distributed to you.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there had been in the past concern about heavy pruning and taking things out. There was a push down towards the end, closer to the cove, because vegetation was getting too tall and it was blocking people's view. That, to me, is a big issue. So I don't know if that's addressed in the plan.
Well, the plan does address the removal of invasive species. So if there is a plant species that is considered invasive
Right.
under the state guidelines, even though it may not be, it can't, not that it's, if it's not on this list, but it's got to be on an invasive species list.
Paul, how big is that plan? Is that you sent out? Is that,
About 100 pages or so.
so we can make?
So it's a little light reading for
Well,
tonight.
make sure we can get an email of it, right?
Yes, yes.
Without having to print it, we can just.
Correct, yeah.
email.
So before next meeting, we ought to try and take a peek at that, everybody.
So who was the one responsible for delivering it?
Well, it's been sent out.
I
I
s-
guess we ought to get it from the clerk, I suppose, maybe?
Is it on the website?
It's on the web, is it on the website? Or no?
City's website?
No, it's not up on the website.
Want to send it to me and I'll send it around?
Yeah, I think I did. I just sent it.
Okay.
Thank you.
While I was sitting here earlier,
This is
because I couldn't find it in my drive, and
The,
that's how they found it.
the entire dune management plan, which the city has to do to provide to the DEP.
No,
No.
don't, it's not, it's really set up to, if groups wanted to apply to the city to do a project within the dune, it sets up, or if the city wants to do something, then it kind of gives us guidance on,
Is this a subset of the beach management plan?
it is not, I mean,
Oh.
I'll say it's a companion to it, it's not a subset of it.
Because I know the beach management plan is contingent on DEP approval.
Right, and the dune, this dune vegetation management plan is not in conflict with any DEP rules, so we can
Okay.
do any of that work without needing an additional permit.
Anybody have any more comments about, Paul, about that new management plan? Okay, Charlotte, you're on the agenda here about some climate change information you want to talk about?
Well, in terms of youth, a theme that we examined partially last meeting,
After this meeting.
I just wanted to follow up with a couple of comments. In other words, Pew Research has found that the youth in our country, about 76% of them, say that climate change is their biggest societal concern. And with that in mind, I did find that our ANJAC report, autumn 2022, talks about what New Jersey is doing to help train the youth. There's a Watershed Institute that we have Sustainability Ambassadors Program. We have Watch Trenton Environment by youth leaders, and so on and so forth, just in our state of New Jersey. But if you branch out a little bit more, we can find out that indeed the country, the U.S., has now created over 100,000 new jobs in that area for the youth. And 5 states, California, Colorado, Maine, Michigan, the state of Washington, have launched successful Climate Corps programs with an additional 5 coming on. Arizona, Utah, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Maryland, all of them announcing programs for the youth, with creating over, at this moment, 100,000 new jobs with U.S. Investment in their education. And further, just to hit home here where I am at this moment, we have a group of students from the Babcock branch. This Babcock group are 100,000 homes, and they are all solar green. And in their school system, they have recently reached out to the Ukraine. They have built solar chargers for families in the Ukraine. And their Rotary Club is now assuming the expense to get these solar chargers to the families in the Ukraine. So it's interesting, I think, that we see young people taking a hand in trying to harness the power that they have as their energy and launching new steps for a climate core in our country. So it's something to look forward to watch the youth become more and more involved. I'm sure that the Nature Center of Cape May has programs that they offer in the summertime that also help students understand that we are all actually connected and we are all dependent on the environment that surrounds us, and we need to take care of it just like a flock of birds thinks that their young need to thrive with food and water, shelter and cover up. Providing a safe environment for the youth. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have anything else to say?
Well, that just makes me think about these education outreach that we're doing as a commission. And if we're putting together these flyers or brochures, I mean, maybe one is, we've got water conservation and invasive species, dark sky, which all relate to climate change, but do we have another flyer that's listed, climate change impacts or action items? And we just a bullet point, very simple things that you can do, like turn down the lights and, reduce water consumption. All of these things are related. I don't know. I'm brainstorming here. I'm just throwing things out there that it's another thing that we can say we're being proactive about. And,
Merle, can you put that on the agenda for next time, just a climate change flyer? We'll talk about it next meeting.
yeah. I mean, I just wrote an article for the Herald that I think comes out next week or the week after, and it's on awakening the garden in spring and eco-friendly actions in the garden, in the landscape. And my first tip is to take the Eco Pledge, which is a list of 10 simple things that you can do in your yard. So that kind of thing. I'm not talking about a big thing that we have to create, but just some things that we can get out there and have our residents and visitors start thinking.
Kim, can you make sure we have those, whatever flyers you have on the dark sky for next meeting, so we can
Okay.
start to get that together, whatever we want to do, all right?
Okay.
Anybody else have anything to say? Anybody? All right.
Think locally, act globally.
Good meeting, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Shut your mics off.
Oh, brain.
Hi,
damage,
Charlotte.
sorry.
Gretchen, do you want to give me some of the flyers, the two-sided, and I'll scan them in and send them around?
The flyers that we've done, that Justine created last year? I don't necessarily have flyers. I have content, I don't have flyers. Justine? No, I mean, yeah, which are the same flyers that You're right. Yes. Right. And if all those then can be on the city website, I mean, the more places we put it, and then I can make a PowerPoint with it. We can make simple handout for